Hi, welcome to our presentation today on Big Decisions, Are Clinical Trials Right for You? My name is Christy Van Horn, and I am a program consultant with the Hemophilia Federation of America, and I'm very excited to be presenting this information and webinar for you today. I just want to start by thanking our sponsors with Adhere for their support and contribution to make this webinar possible. So a huge shout out and thanks to them for their support. We're going to be discussing today. So a number of things. We're going to start with an overview of the clinical trial process and the phases that are involved in clinical trials. Now we're going to be discussing the participation of informed consent and what exactly that means. We're going to end with weighing some pros and cons of being involved in a trial, and we're going to end with where to find some follow-up information if you want to continue and look a little bit more in depth at some of the information that we've discussed today. I'm going to provide you with some really great resources. So in the context of this presentation, we are going to be discussing informed consent in the context of a clinical trial. So what that really means. You have rights as a participant of a trial, and we really want you to understand that informed consent is much more than a signature on a piece of paper. It's really understanding what the clinical trial goals are, how it affects you, how it affects your health care. So we're really going to talk about how and when and questions that you can ask your providers and research assistants working on them. But first, let's talk a little bit more about clinical trials and what they are. Oops, sorry, there we go. So a clinical trial is really a research study where volunteers to take investigational treatment under the supervision of a doctor and or research professional. The goals of clinical trials are really to determine how effective the drug is, how safe it is, and also to prove dosage. They also look at side effects and other things, which we will discuss. So my computer's a little slow today. So clinical trials. Now, preclinical experiments in labs actually start before the actual trial. So they're done on animals, as most of us know and learned about in biology in high school. If that research is successful, the researchers submit for approval to continue the research. And once that's approved, they start the human testing. So that's when the clinical trial actually begins. So there are years of research conducted from the time that they test it in animals and mice to the time that it ends up in the pharmacy. It can actually take 10 to 15 years. It's a long process. The clinical trial section of that takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years on average. Once the clinical trials are done, it has to go through a review process. And then, of course, the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, or in Europe, the European Medicines Agency, has to approve it. As you can imagine, that takes a long time, and it should. They want to make sure everything's in line and everything's working properly and analyze the data from all the different studies. So it's a long process, but it's an important process. So who can participate in a clinical trial? So all clinical trials have guidelines about who can participate, and it will differ from trial to trial. Qualifications can include your age, your gender, the types and stage of your disease, hemophilia A, hemophilia B, your previous treatment history, and other medical conditions. So these are just some of the guidelines. So what is protocol? This is a term you might hear when you are entering into a study. The trials are based on rules that are called protocols. So what the protocol describes are scientific rationale, the objectives of the trial, the design. As we just mentioned, the protocol is what will provide you with the guidelines for who can participate in the trial. It also does all the scheduling of tests and procedures and the length of the study. The one important piece about protocol is that what it does is sets the stage for all the different testing sites. So if you're doing a test, or not a test necessarily, but a trial in Austin, Texas, it looks the exact same no matter where the study is done. So all the protocols and tests and everything that's being done in Austin will look the same as if it's being done in London, England. So it's very, very important that researchers and doctors follow the protocols when they are researching. So everything always looks the same. So these protocols have to be reviewed and approved by an IRB, or an institutional review board, or an ethics review board. So most clinical trials are approved and monitored to ensure are minimal and worth the benefits, the potential benefits. So they really weigh those risks and benefits. IRB is made up of an independent committee that consists of not only doctors, but also statisticians and members of the community. So it's not just doctors looking at the information. There's a number of people across many different facets. And then lastly, you should ask. And when you're going in to discuss a clinical trial with your doctor, you should ask if it's been IRB approved. Most of them, especially in the hemophilia community, will be, but it just shows that you know and you've done your research, and it's good to know and it's good to ask. Now we're going to jump into a little bit of discussion about clinical trials and what happens in these phases. So each phase of a clinical trial is considered a separate trial. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, they all have to be approved in between each phase. So after the completion of each stage, investigators are required to submit data to the FDA for approval. So you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Each one has to be approved before you can move on to the next one. In phase 1, they're really looking at safety. They want to determine the effects. They do want to address dosage, but it's focused. So there's only a small number of healthy volunteers that they test the treatment on, and it can take several months to complete. So it's not too long, and it's not involving too many people. This is really the initial kind of test. Phase 2 takes several months to up to 2 years. And this is really testing the efficacy of the drug, side effects, and only about 1/3 of experimental drugs successfully complete both phase 1 and phase 2. So when you think about it, 33%, it's actually not a lot. But again, it's a good thing. It's showing us that the drug does or doesn't work. So these are obviously very important phases of this process. Phase 3, large-scale testing. It can last up to several years. This is the largest scale phase. The more people they can test at this time, the more effective it can be proven to be. So they really want a large sample to show the FDA or whoever is approving the drug that it is successful and will work in the general public. And a pretty large number, 70 to 90% of the drugs that enter phase 3 successfully complete this phase. So let's just talk for a minute about analysis and obstacles within the hemophilia community. So once these studies are done, researchers really want to prove that the medications that were tested were effective. So the key piece of this is making sure that they have a lot of people included in these studies, because the more people they have involved, the more significant the research is. This is easy, not necessarily easy. I don't want to make it sound like this is an easy process, but when you have, say, cancer or diabetes, it is easier to find people to be involved in studies because so many people are living with these conditions and diseases. So it's a little different when you're dealing with a rare disease. Finding patients and volunteers to be involved in these studies is a little more difficult, simply because there aren't the numbers there. So what happens most of the time in hemophilia studies is they are done on an international level. But again, even then, you do see patients experiencing study fatigue. It's hard because you are often asked to do study after study after study, where somebody with diabetes or, as I mentioned, cancer might not be. So it's just something to consider when you're a part of a rare disease group. There's also growing concerns about inhibitor development and the time and requirements that being involved in a trial take, and then also venipuncture. Finding those veins after being involved in these trials for a long period of time can be difficult. So these are all things to consider and just be aware of. You're not alone, and it's a problem sometimes in the hemophilia community being asked to be in too many studies. But at the same time, it's very empowering because you have a chance to make a difference. So yeah, there's two sides to that. So what we're going to do now is, because you are more likely to be asked to be in a clinical trial than somebody with a disease with a higher incidence, we are going to take a look at informed consent and being involved in informed consent. So what does that mean? Firstly, informed consent is a process when you learn more about the clinical trial before deciding to participate in it. So you don't want to sign that paper until you are absolutely sure that you understand every piece of what is going to be required of you. And that's really up to the research team to provide that information to you and give you the opportunity to ask as many questions as you possibly want to, or possibly can, just to make sure that you feel comfortable. It is not a contract. You have the right to leave the trial at any time. And lastly, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that if English is not your first language, request a translator. It is your right to have one. It is your right to completely understand the information that's being provided to you. So this is a great little diagram, kind of just going over what informed consent is. I really liked this. So you want to weigh the risks and the benefits. It's your opportunity to ask questions, which we're going to go over in just a second, a number of questions that you can ask. It's your opportunity to ask about the nature of the treatment that's going to be provided to you, and ask about alternatives. Is this the right thing for me? Is there anything else that I could possibly be involved in? Or maybe this isn't the right time for me to be involved. So I put this slide in here just to let you know that the next few slides are all about questions. Questions that you can ask during the time that you're discussing, the clinical trial. And we're going to start with, first of all, the overall question. So why is this study important to me? What is the main purpose of this trial? Where is the trial being conducted? So it's probably not just your site, but where else is this study being conducted? Again, a lot of hemophilia studies are conducted internationally. What treatments will be used and how? How will patient safety be monitored? Who is sponsoring the trial? Do I have to pay for any part of the trial, and will my insurance cover it? Always, always, always important questions to ask. And then what happens if I'm harmed by the trial? So clinical trials, specific questions around the clinical trial. So what are the chances that this drug will work? What kinds of risks are involved? How much time will it take? How long will it last? These are all really great questions that you just want to make sure you have the answers to. Does this study involve a treatment already on the market? And can I opt to remain on the treatment even after termination of the trial? So questions to ask, risks and benefits. So what are the possible short-term and long-term benefits? What are my short-term and long-term risks, such as side effects? Really great question to ask. What other options do people have who have a bleeding disorder? So rights and responsibilities. You have rights and responsibilities, especially in the context of informed consent. You know, you really want to make sure that your questions are answered before you agree to treatment or you sign the form. You really want to make sure you understand the purpose of the research. Why are they doing this? What is the goal? What is the perceived outcome? You want to understand that you can refuse treatment to participate. You want to understand that you can stop treatment or withdraw from the study after it's started. And lastly, you have a right to privacy. And doctors also have responsibility. The researchers have responsibilities. You want to discuss the purpose. You want to they want to discuss the purpose with you and provide enough information to consider if they want to take part. You want to take part, sorry. This is why I don't read off slides. I try not to. Do not force. They don't force you or influence you to be a part of the trial. Again, I think this could happen more frequently to you than somebody who has a more common disease or infection. So you could be pushed a little bit more than somebody who doesn't have a rare disease. And you shouldn't be. At the end of the day, it's your decision. They should discuss the risks and benefits with you and respect your privacy. And as always, adhere to their ethical guidelines. So tips for talking to your doctor about this. Really consider taking a friend or family along for support. And if you're going in to talk about your child, take another adult. Maybe it's another parent or a friend or somebody for support. And just an extra set of ears is always so helpful in these situations. Plan ahead. So write down questions. But don't hesitate to ask new questions while you're there. That's super important. If something comes up and you have a question, of course, ask that question. So write down the answers, and then also think about and consider bringing your phone or a recording device so that you can actually go back and, and listen to the answers while you make your decision. Maybe they said something, or maybe you forgot to ask something that you want to ask a follow-up question to. It's just very helpful to have it recorded. You can follow up and listen to those answers again. So, sorry. See, okay, there we go. So for a second, we are going to talk about your child's participation. So parents should really have an understanding of all the things we just discussed. But also just in the context of your child, what are the procedures? What are the consequences, harms and benefits? We've already discussed all of this. So just really reminding you that ask the same questions when it's your child, and making sure that you really understand your rights in the context. So there was a really great mom's blog about a year ago, May 2015. This was written 16. Oh, I guess it was a couple years ago. Wow, time flies. But I'm going to read a quote from actually the executive director of HFA, and this is about her son. So this is a really wonderful example of how her son became engaged and included in the process of being in the clinical trial. So what she said here is, here's where my heart celebrated and did a few cartwheels. And he asked questions, really good questions about what exactly he wanted to do, why he was doing this, and what would be done with the information. Then he adamantly refused to sign until he fully understood. So he was 12 at the time and had just become involved in the process and wanted to understand the clinical trial process. And this is really great. You know, when you start to see your kids becoming more involved in their care and wanting to take part in their care, it's really important in the context of clinical trials that you're also including them. Write down questions, discuss questions to ask the researchers together. When you go in to the actual meeting, make sure that if they want to, they have the opportunity to ask the questions themselves. It's a great opportunity to involve them. And just sit down and ask them what they think. And we all know our children and when the right time is to start these conversations. So the pros of being and benefits of being involved in a clinical trial. You play a really active role in your healthcare, and that's exciting. You can gain access to treatments before they're actually available, which is also really exciting. It's great because you're going to help others. You are helping to make sure that this treatment could be available to everyone with hemophilia or everyone with a bleeding disorder. So it's really exciting to play a part in that. And this new treatment may have fewer side effects. So there are definitely really wonderful benefits to being involved in a clinical trial. The cons are that there may be unpleasant, serious, or even life-threatening side effects, and that's just the truth. A treatment may not be effective, and the protocol may require more time and attention than non-protocol treatment. So you might have to make additional trips to the study site. You may have more treatments. You may be in the hospital. There may be more dosage requirements. So it's definitely something, and this is why it's so important to understand the protocol and everything involved in the trial before you sign on the dotted line. Maybe it doesn't fit into your family's life at this time to take on a clinical trial. Maybe it does. So all of this, the pros and the cons, are really great reasons, and just really stressing the fact that you should take on a really, comprehensive process before you sign on. So I'm going to pause here for just a second if you want to write down these really great reasons. Here are three. The clinicaltrials.gov is a great place to go and find out if and what trials are going on around the country. It's a really wonderful resource. The other two sites really follow up and give you and provide more information on everything we've discussed today through this webinar. So I encourage you to go to all three, do a little searching around. It's just a really, really all great resources. And I didn't give you too many because I think sometimes that can be overwhelming. I think 3 is a good amount. So the first is www.ciscrp.org. The second is CenterWatch, and this one is my particular favorite. I love this website. And it's www.centerwatch.com, not .org. And then the last is the government website, the clinicaltrials.gov. So please take some time and do a little searching and just continue learning about everything that we've discussed today. These are really great resources. So I'm also going to take a second because HFA has started a new research program, which is super exciting. It's very community-centered, focused, and driven. It's not just participants, but you are the originators of the research ideas. So we really want to hear from you. Experts that participate in the research process. We want this to be complementary to other research that's being done. And again, we just really want to focus on the concerns of the community. and being transparent and secure above all else. So the goal, there we go. We want to provide, again, the community with an opportunity to have participation in the research process and just to have a voice. So that brings us to you. So what should HFA focus on as far as research efforts? Send us your questions. Again, the research is driven by the community. So at this email, if you just send an email to research@hemophiliafed.org with some of your ideas of things that you would like to see studied within the community, that would be great, and we will get back to you. So again, that email is research@hemophiliafed.org. Oops. And lastly, I wanted to thank you, but my computer seems to have a mind of its own. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any further questions, you can email hfaprograms@hemophiliafed.org or info@hemophiliafed.org. Please like us on social media. We always have great resources posted there. And thank you so much for joining us.